that slavery was somehow a uniquely American evil. But the unfortunate fact is that the institution of slavery has been more than the rule, than the exception throughout human history. I mean, is there some problem about being self-critical about the U.S. role in slavery that is demeaning to our sense of self?
No, not at all. I actually liked the way, I can't remember if it was you, Senator Welch, or Senator Durbin, made the point that it's a fact of our history that must be openly discussed. And I think that I myself like to teach American history, warts and all. I actually think that the best way to teach it is actually to teach it clearly, debate it clearly, but also teach it fully, which I think also includes how the Declaration and its principles really became the fuel of the abolitionist movement. And so despite Mr. Jefferson owning slaves and writing the Declaration, all the things we could put into that category, the fact is they overcame it. That's the amazing part of it. So the fuller story, but yes, there's absolutely no reason why that should not be a part of what we teach and note, even on this anniversary.
No, I appreciate you saying that, because I think I admire people who, when they're assessing their own performance, have a capacity upon reflection and with a little distance to be self-critical and appreciate that they came up short and try to learn from it. I mean, is there any difference in a person being willing to make their own personal self-assessment about their weaknesses and a country being willing to have a candid conversation about where it came up short in achieving its noble ideals, the ones we have in the Declaration?
In general, I think the answer to that is no. That's how Martin Luther King looked at it. That's how Frederick Douglass looked at it. I think probably the point I would make in terms of how with this national conversation, this particular question has been occurring, is to make the observation that kind of both sides of the debate, if you will, like to think of this in binary terms, all good, all bad. Whereas I think that it's a much more complicated question, as you've recognized. But I think one of the things we rarely are capable of or it's hard to teach and hard to explain, is how you can hold a principle, all men are created equal, but understand that holding that principle does not mean you're able to bring it about immediately. But somehow it's still praiseworthy to have put the principle down, to embedded it in the Declaration in particular, such that it could be then carried forward, and it would become that fuel, if you will. So the existence of slavery, as barbaric and as bad as it was, to be noted in our history, should not overwhelm or overcome or erase the fact that the amazing fact that a bunch of men, many of whom owned slaves, including Jefferson, many of whom did not, some of whom owned slaves and then got rid of them, and including a few abolitionists at the Continental Congress. The amazing thing is they began that document by saying that all men are created equal. I think that was, looking back, really the death knell of slavery, despite the fact that it continued to exist. The Continental Congress had already abolished the slave trade. Many states, including your own and a lot of the northern states, immediately started moving towards abolition, some slower than others. And then our history is kind of the tragic but also successful tale, noble tale of how that played out.
Have you ever noticed that whenever slavery, America's founding, or patriotism comes up in a Senate hearing, the room immediately becomes divided? Some people believe talking about America's mistakes is patriotic because it helps the country grow. Others argue that constantly focusing on those mistakes overshadows everything the nation has accomplished. But during this hearing, something unexpected happened. Instead of trading political punches, Mr. Welch and historian Dr. Matthew Spalding found themselves agreeing on a point that has become increasingly rare in today's political climate. So what exactly happened? Mr. Welch questioned Dr. Matthew Spalding, who led President Trump's 1776 commission, a panel created to promote what it called patriotic education. The discussion centered on one of the most sensitive topics in American history, slavery. Mr. Welch asked a direct question. Is there anything wrong with America being honest about its role in slavery? Does acknowledging those failures somehow make the country weaker? Dr. Spalding's response caught many people off guard. He agreed that slavery should be taught openly and honestly. But he argued that history shouldn't stop there. According to Spalding, if we only teach America's failures without explaining how the principles of the Declaration of Independence inspired the abolitionist movement and later the civil rights movement, then we're leaving out a major part of the story. He even acknowledged one of history's greatest contradictions. Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal, while owning slaves himself. For Spalding, that contradiction doesn't erase the Declaration's importance. Instead, he argued that those very words eventually became the foundation people like Frederick Douglass and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used to challenge injustice and push America toward equality.
Well, thank you very much for that, because I share that. I think there's an aspiration, and that aspiration was laid out in an eloquent way in the Declaration. And each generation has the challenge to make us a more equal society, a more perfect union. You know, Mr. Griswold, I really appreciated your focus on the effort for us and the benefit to each of us when our life is about purpose and helping others and doing something beyond ourselves. But this is where I disagree with the chairman. I just don't see when there's a debate about, say, the origins of slavery or how it came to be or what are the challenges we face, that goes into self-hate, it really reflects to me self-confidence about facing the historical reality that is part of our tradition. Is that in conflict with your point of view?
No, sir, I don't think so. I think I agree with my fellow witness that it's important to take an honest look at our whole history. I take a lot of guidance from the philosopher Richard Rorty's work, where he found insights in psychological research. And we've learned that it is not possible to hate yourself into self-improvement. When you recognize that there's something wrong in your life or something wrong in your habits or behavior, it's not possible to self-loathe your way to betterment.
I agree with that.
And that was his analogy.
But he wasn't suggesting that there shouldn't be some self-assessment.
No, certainly not.
Exactly.
And my only point, sir, was that I appreciate Richard Rorty's point that nations are like people, and that self-respect and patriotism is the precondition of self-improvement.
Right. Thank you. You know, the other part of this that is disturbing to me that you heard me express in the opening statement was turning this into a mercantile event, particularly when there's some personal benefit from the various activities around 250. I mean, where does it fit? Let me ask you first, Mr. Spalding. My understanding is that the goal your commission had was to have a celebration that was owned by each and every one of us who is a beneficiary of the American tradition, as opposed to it being a tribute to an individual. Can you just answer that and elaborate?
No, in general, the 1776 report merely is a marker. There are intended to be others. The first of a series of arguments intended to put at the very center of whatever we were doing, because it hadn't really been planned yet. Whatever it was going to be was ultimately going to be having educational content and civic content. And it was really that report focused on civic identity, civic education in a very powerful way, as it's the intent of that anniversary, appropriate for marking the 20th anniversary of this great document, this great country.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to
Both men seem to agree that patriotism and self-reflection don't have to be opposites. The real difference, they suggested, is whether history is used to inspire improvement or simply to divide people. The biggest takeaway came when Dr. Spalding quoted philosopher Richard Rorty, arguing that just as people can't hate themselves into becoming better, nations also need a sense of self-respect if they hope to improve.